Thank you all for being here this evening. Welcome, welcome. Thank you all for being here for an evening with Maxine Skates and Joseph Millar. Before we get started, I'd like to open up the space with the land acknowledgement. Literary Arts is based in Portland, Oregon, and we are currently on unceded land. The Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, Wallala bands, and the Tualatin Kalapuya, and many other indigenous nations of the Columbia River occupied and operated on this land long before Western colonizers arrived, and many continue to do so today. Despite attempts of removal and erasure, these communities remain a strong and vital part of our future. Literary Arts recognizes that this acknowledgement is only a small step in affirming the ongoing presence and contributions of our Native communities, and we commit to engaging these communities more fully as we fulfill our mission. For those of you who are not familiar with Literary Arts, we are a nonprofit community-based arts organization with a 37-year history of serving readers and writers. Our mission is to engage readers, support writers, and to inspire the next generation with great literature. Our programs include the Portland Arts and Lectures, programs for youth, the Oregon Book Awards and Fellowships Program, and the Portland Book Festival. We also offer reader seminars, writing classes, and free literary events like this one year-round. I invite you all to check us out over at literary-arts.org. Now I'll introduce our readers for the night. Maxine Skates' fourth collection of poetry, My Wilderness, was published in October of 2021 from the University of Pittsburgh Press. Maxine is the author of 3 previous collections of poetry: Undone, which was a finalist for the Green Rose Prize; Black Loam, which received the Lyre Prize and was a finalist for the Oregon Book Award; and Toluca Street, which received the Angus Lynch Starrett Poetry Prize and the Oregon Book Award for Poetry. We're also joined by Joseph Millar's. Joseph Millar's first collection, Overtime, was a finalist for the 2001 Oregon Book Award. His second collection, Fortune, appeared in 2007, followed by his third, Blue Rust, in 2012. His fourth collection, Kingdom, was released in early 2017. Dark Harvest is his fifth book, published in October of 2021. He teaches in Pacific University's low residency MFA program and in North Carolina State's MFA program in creative writing. Thank you both for being here. Hi, Maxine, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Literary Arts, for having us tonight, and thank you, audience, for showing up. I'm going to read from the second half of this book tonight, and the first poem is called The Oaks. The tornadoes split an old oak and took another on my friend's farm in Illinois. I think of cutting down our oak because it's bound to fall in a storm, taking the fence and smaller trees someday. It is our last oak, the 2 on the road, the one that wrapped around the corner of the house, all gone to the shifting waters of the aquifers that ate their roots. But nothing ever happens the way we think it will. One oak never fell but tipped, caught by the branches of a fir one still summer day. And I've forgotten until this moment that yesterday I sank slowly to my knees when I stepped off the trail so a man and his young dog could pass my dog and me. Some of the oaks in the meadow went that way, laid down gently in a storm, their outstretched branches holding candelabras of snow. And since I've been reading Ovid, everything seems on its way to becoming something else. I think of our neighbor June, who held me when I was a child, and how I loved the tears she cried, a wordless, watery dissolution, which sometimes felt like both of us were disappearing. The way that water nymph who tried to stop Pluto from taking Proserpina did disappear after he stepped through her pool to the underworld. She cried, and each human feature falling away until she lost her voice. I didn't know what made June so sad or why her curtains were closed to sunlight. I think of her on still winter mornings when the sun comes up over the ridge where the big oaks tilt to the pool of water we can't see, as Skip runs through the tall grasses, his coat golden, the grasses glittering, sheathed in hoarfrost. This next poem is called Bridge, and I make a reference to Hirokazu Koreeda and his movie Afterlife. If you've got access to the Criterion collection, you should see this movie. It's a wonderful movie. Bridge. Those afternoons, I can only say, as a child's backpack, blooming brighter than the others, horse left behind in a trailer, kicking slats, sheaths of irises rattling and wind. Or yes, the jar of honey falling from my hands in the grocery store, heaviness slipping, glass I couldn't save from breaking, and yet some pleasure in a pound of honey spreading slowly at my feet, gumshoe whose trace remained long after the kid came with his mop. The way that day last fall stays even now, the long climb to the meadow we thought we'd never see again. We were so happy then, dog disappearing into yellow reeds and green pools. On the way down, I stood at the canyon's rim, just listening for something to carry me. The stream a hush, then aspens muttering. In Koreeda's Afterlife, the dead choose one memory to be reenacted before they cross over. One memory holding the weight of all the rest, erasing even itself as it's completed. And when the lights go up, its author's gone. Yet when the living look back, nothing's discrete. Sadness comes not in a single memory, but because we know what happens next. The last words we can't know as last until nothing follows. This next poem is a bit longer. It's in 8 sections, and I'll just give a good pause between each section. It's called Storm, and it's for Bridget. I arrived by boat in a dream. Someone asked, "Is the water deep?" And the boatman stepped into the water to pull the boat to shore. Your family was there, but you were sleeping. You appeared, but disappear. No reason to think anything was wrong. Sometimes we do not talk for months, but now your death comes as suddenly as if it were a car crash on a country road, when all summer you were dying. If I had known, what would I have done? Stand like a shield between you and the death you wanted no one to know was coming? I'm tired and older, the sky yellow with leaves. This afternoon, the stoplights pulse red, children pour out of the schoolyard, everything blurs in the rain, and I see you out there on the farm, watching the wind come toward you. I'd hear it crackling on the line. Out there with your dogs, the chickens who one year disappeared in a blizzard, but didn't they come back the next winter, bigger, tougher, their feathers blazing against the snow? Out in the woods, I cut ivy from the firs. The vines are so thick. The dog helps. She leaps and pulls the vine with her teeth. Such a simple thing, but something you would have praised me for. The years I have stayed, lived in one place. Greedy, I would have listened, your words a balm. You who never listened to praise, who could not take what you so readily gave. In last night's dream, you are giving a party. Then, in the last room where I find you, you are sleeping again. When I look for a place to write down what I have seen, I wake you. You smile. But now I wonder if I disturb you because I always have one more thing to tell you. This time, it's how in the movie, the aliens emerged from the fog, long tentacles dangling hooves like those of giraffes. And I remembered a wedding reception at a zoo, how I wandered up to visit the giraffes, the band playing down below as the bride sang to the groom, I'm going to love you like nobody's loved you, come rain or come shine, though the marriage is over now. In the movie, time had no beginning and no end, looping endlessly. The leaders of the world as always terrified by intruders and turning on each other. At the end, the character who'd already seen the future asked her lover if he would live his life over if he knew what was coming. And then I heard you say or sigh, oh, Max, as clearly as if you were sitting next to me. I drift the way the cows used to drift up in the meadow. From a distance, they could have been anything, a tree, a stump. Even after they were gone, I used to latch the gate when there was nothing to keep in or out. Now the slats are broken and the gate hangs by a screw. When I was a kid, the neighbor built a sailboat in his backyard. We'd gather to watch him drape sheets of fiberglass across the ribs of the hull. Everything smelled of resin, of trees we'd never seen, all possibility taking on a shape. He made something. I miss our conversation about the work we did and loved throughout the time we had. It seemed a way to defy the kind of sense we were never good at making. In these last days, we've been digging out from the ice storm, pulling branches off other branches as branches still fell, until last night the temperature rose above freezing. When I woke, the firs were swaying a little in the wind, the last of the ice having slid away, their frozen limbs unsheathed. This morning, the newspaper names the roll call of the famous who have left this year. Is that the so-called moving on, the readying to begin anew? I don't think it's about moving on. I think grief flows until it floods every artery and vein, until we throb with it and breathe it and let it hurt us until it is our own. Your voice had grown smaller, more solitary, I thought, with your many chores on that late spring day we last spoke, when you were telling me goodbye. This poem is called April. Are we okay? Yeah, okay. There is so much I do not want to know about what I've said and done, my daily meanness and indifference, my stupid carelessness, remembering instead a ghost town halfway up a mountain, the graying clapboard of a church, its open windows, or how my mother searches for her blue ledger, the one she stopped using 50 years ago, though it seems just yesterday, which is why she's searching and cannot find it on any shelf or table in her room. And isn't that the heart of it? My heart, anyway. She never cared as I do for the past. And now it's a wave slowly sliding over her, taking more of each remaining day as it pulls away. She knows her name is written in the ledger's pages with the many she has lost. But when I say I've lost my friend, my mother is not listening. She's busy breathing in the time she has. When I've thought if I kept saying goodbye, my grief would lessen until I remembered what I'd been thinking about when those windows were open and the brightness flew in and out, and either way was fine. a lilac blooming, and a dingy curtain waving all at once. Though many of the poems, well, throughout this book, deal with my mother's last years. And this is a poem called 8 Days that deals with the last 8 days of her life. She lived to be 100 years and 8 days old. You'd awakened happy, having arrived at your 100th birthday. Your yellow, your red roses on the bureau and the bed table. You asked to be helped into your purple dress to celebrate, but then collapsed, lapsed, unwilling even then to begin the end of it. You had so much to do, and during those last days, we too were busy with your leaving and did not know about the children taken from their parents at the border. But last night I heard them crying, sobbing, "Poppy, Poppy." I heard them sobbing, and so did anyone who listened. It's odd the way dying takes over everything, the tending to one life on its journey when there are so many other crossings, so many others journeying too. In those first days, I told you stories of the crossings meant to help you on your way. I told of Charon and his ferry, then the sun settling over the sea you could walk into, then another river, the boat drifting with you in it, the current carrying you away. Until on the third day, I settled on the names: Mother, Father, Joe and Charlie, Millie and Larry, Willie and John, sometimes more and sometimes less, a kind of chant. And because you'd made me and I'd had no child, I read you what I'd made of the stories you had told me. I asked if you remembered how your grandmother, who'd crossed that border as a 10-year-old, taught the mockingbird to sing. I thought you almost smiled. On the fourth morning, you did not open your eyes, and I started to clean, to bag what you had already forgotten in the corners of your room. It was hot, the windows were open, and down in the alley, men were on their break, sitting on the loading dock, playing music, smoke drifting up. I was talking to Lorena, the nurse, when I saw you raise your hand, your eyes wide open, though you were talking, though you were looking somewhere beyond me, your hand raised, one finger pointing. You were pointing for a long time. Did you see them? Were they waiting? After that, you never opened your eyes again. Bill helped to bathe you on the 5th day. When they took the children, reports say no one was allowed to touch them, to hold their hands as we held yours, to offer tenderness in their travail. I watched him lift your arm, guide the cloth over your blue stream slowing, and slowly rub the cream into your skin as Lorena told him to do. Someone came and vacuumed while we were out, but Lorena said you did not stir. More family came and went, talking over and around you as if it were the party we had planned. And on the 5th day, I understood my brother had not told you you could go. We always joked you never did what you did not want to do until he said you should. Were you waiting or uncertain? Your boy, almost 80, came to tell you on days 6 and 7. I don't know what he said, but on days 6 and 7, he said it. Your lungs were filling, your breath grew shallower, no food, no water, no tubes, just your body lessening. Little mother, your breath grew shallower until it was not on the 8th day in the morning when you ceased to breathe. Then I kissed your forehead one last time, and soon the young men came and wrapped you in your white shroud and took you to be buried in your purple dress. I'll end with a poem called Left Behind. By the time my mother died, She didn't have much left. The Hummel figures I bought her for years with money from babysitting and my first job had my name taped on them, but I gave them to my sister-in-law. I did take the toilet paper, toothpaste, soap, and Kleenex piled in the closet. I took 2 gift certificates for See's Candy, her final present to all she loved last Christmas, when it was important for her to know she could still give gifts. I found them under the table by her chair, along with a Netflix DVD she was certain had been lost in the mail. I took the stamps I'd sent her a few months before. I took the clothes hamper that stood in the hallway of our house on 97th Street, but not the bloody Christ that hung above it on a nail, the only place my father would allow. I took the blanket covering her when she died. I haven't used it yet. I looked and looked for a necklace of blue agates I'd given her for her 75th birthday, but could not find it. Last night, I dreamed I was still cleaning out her room, but ran out of garbage bags, so had to stop when I'd wanted to be done. But maybe I never will be. I cleaned out her house 10 years ago when she had to move, and it still feels like yesterday. She used to ask me where various things had gone, and I'd say, because I'd forgotten or someone had not wanted something despite a label with their name on it, that I had done the best I could. I took her china then, because I could not bear the sadness of not loving what she had loved. I took a photo of her after she died, still looking very much as she looked those last days as she grew into her silence. I haven't deleted it, but I haven't looked at it for a while. I took her hummingbirds, wooden and clay and spun glass. I took the buttons she had saved in their wooden box. Sometimes I run my fingers through them, cloth and clear and ruby colored. I see her sewing new leather buttons on my brother's coat after my dog tore it from the clothesline. She kept the ones without the teeth marks. I've used up the toothpaste, the toilet paper, but I'm still working on the stamps and the Kleenex and have yet to redeem the See's gift certificates. I took a small wooden chest, which now holds her birth certificate, marriage license, and divorce papers, and many of the letters she wrote me after I was gone. Thank you.
That was really wonderful, Maxine. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you, Jessica.
Joe, how are you feeling? You ready?
I was trying to unmute myself on the little square. So thank you very much for coming out to hear poetry tonight, or staying in to hear poetry tonight. We appreciate it, Max. I love those poems. That quiet voice of gentle statement. I admire that very much. I don't seem quite able to do that in my own work, but I admire it when I hear it, along with, of course, the great physical detail. I'm better on that, but not on the quiet statement. So this first poem that I'm gonna read you guys is called Nativity, and it's about when I was born. Not to brag, but what can I say? And I got the idea for this poem from reading an autobiography of a yogi, when Yogananda is writing in there about when he's born, and he can remember when he's born, Yogananda, and he's saying that he could hear the sounds of the universe, and he could hear them, all up above him and coming all the way down into the Bengali dialect of his parents. And they were talking to him and he could understand them. but he couldn't speak back to them. And that infant means the root of infant, I think it's Greek, I'm not sure though. But anyway, it's supposed to mean can't speak. And that frustrated him and pissed him off. And so he was crying and crying, and they were trying to comfort him, but he couldn't really make them understand what he wanted to make them understand. So this imagines that I could remember that, and that what it might have been like to, if I could have remembered that, which I really can't. I should make haste to say. Nativity. Long after daybreak, they were still trying to deliver me, the birth blood dropping on the hospital tiles, glittering under the lights. I saw my father's corporal stripes, his tan army shirt that smelled of tobacco. I heard the cold wind no one remembers pouring down out of Canada. My mother wrapped me up in her robe, fragrant with camphor and sweat, hushing my desolate howls. She loved me and she hated me through those early months when I wanted everything she had, and all my father wanted, aside from her warm, pale body, was to finish his hitch and get the hell out of the army forever. Each morning, fine grains of salt glinted like ice on the kitchen table, and like the insatiable mammal I was, I fastened on to her chafed, dark nipples. They named me rent money because I didn't pay any. They named me Popsicle, Little Tongue, Gasser. In August, the Japanese surrendered, and he mustered out in Wisconsin. We headed east in a 38 Studebaker, its big engine swallowing the miles of America, wheat fields and highway, Chicago and Cleveland, and they named me So Long, It's Been Good to Know You. Some of you may know that song, that's So Long, It's Been Good to Know You, Woody Guthrie song, Dust Bowl song. This is a poem called Year of the Ox. Now the town sleeps in its burial robes, its dim lace of snow trailing over the rooftops, over the train station, over the struts on the hotel catwalk into the dark new moon. In my boots and my lucky red sweater, I'm going to walk right up to the Ox King, touch the bell of his throat, his nostrils, his thick breath sweet as new grass. I'm going to ask him about the cold wind shedding its seed pods and broken stems over the garden we left behind, where another man and woman, yoked together like us, sleep now on the back porch, the new bamboo pressing up through the mud. I can hear the sea calling out from beyond the jetty, smell the pines near the flooded out bridge where today someone tried to winch an old Volkswagen up from the swirling waters. Far down the coast, the same west wind blows through the marshes and river mouth where my brother's boat rocks on its mooring. He's the only one awake, modest and reliable, replacing a frayed hose, tightening the clamps. He doesn't trust the government, shining his trouble light into the darkness, his radio tuned to a satellite broadcasting through the blue dust of space. There's a couple. I've dedicated this selected to my brother Chuck, who passed away a year, well, it'll be 2 years at Christmas. So there's a couple poems for him in here. But this poem is called Lorca in California. And I remember reading in this one biography of Lorca that I read that his parents sent him over to America after he got out of college, or a little bit as a young. I imagine him as a young man in his 20s, and his parents who were pretty well off, and they had this genius child. And he had graduated from University of Madrid, and they sent him to America, where he wrote those amazing poems in Poet in New York. But while he had been in college, it's said that he may have had an affair with Salvador Dali and the French filmmaker Bunel. He was close with those guys. And so he gets sent on this ship over to America by his parents, and he missed them, I think. And there was some gossip, which whether it's true or not, who knows, that Bunel's movie, The Andalusian Dog, was kind of like that. They kind of Bunel and Dali stayed behind, and he wanted to be with those guys, but they looked down at him a little bit, I think. And they probably thought he was provincial. But of course he was a fucking genius, as we know. So I wrote this poem for him, thinking of it as like I wanted him to get some revenge on those guys. That was my thoughts anyway. So it's called Lorca in California. And I saw we have Santa Cruz. We have Pat's here from Santa Cruz, and she'll recognize some of this landscape. Lorca in California. Half the time I'm alone at night when the raccoons come down to the yard, rummage collectors, chewers of pine cones. They sniff the flowers in the possum's carcass, seething with the white mouths of death. I grew tired of the poet dressed in black, like the night of no moon, the curved balconies and colonnades, hothouse Madrid's old lacquer. I couldn't care less about Dali now. His glass clocks and corpses, his giant mustache, or Bunel's fake lenses and flickering lights, all that bright equipment. I want to stay here forever in this ramshackle hut with its roses and dog hair, its peach tree blossoms, pollen and dust, the compost fuming out back by the fence. My new lover works on the tuna boats. He comes home smelling of old rope and anchovies, money in both his front pockets, shiny blue scales on his boots. So we want to save time, for you guys to ask some pressing questions. Here's a poem that it's kind of more helter-skelter. It's called One Day. Everything shimmers with the sound of the train rattling over the bridge, especially the ears and nostrils and teeth of the horse riding out to the pasture of breath, where the long freight runs on diesel fuel that used to run on coal. I keep listening for the crickets and birds, and my words fall down below. I mistook the train for a thunderstorm. I mistook the willow tree for a home. It's nothing to brag about when you think of it, spending this time all alone. I wandered into the hayfield, and 2 ticks jumped in my hair. They dug in my scalp and drank up my blood like the sweet wine of Virginia, then left me under the druid moon down here on earth in the kingdom. And this is another poem I wrote for my little wife. It's called Courtly. No matter the high-flown, improbable phrases, the tinned fish and flowers, lipstick and wine, no matter Venice's gimcrack cornices holding their arms apart in the night, or the red dahlias swaying on long stems, walloping each other in the summer wind. It isn't the blue rocks at low tide or the long grass by the seawall, lady of time and dried white flowers, lady of distant rain, who wanders off looking for a book of matches along the road near the coffee shop, built to look like a chateau and spattered with bird shit, where gulls and ravens, like the Hollywood movies, have feasted for over a century on the corpses of Lancelot and Keats. Nobody knows what it's cost you to keep facing up to the world like this, with its airport exhaust and chalk dust, both of us tired, both of us cold, trying to talk with the professors and lonely for California. I bring these today to the door of your dream, as close as I can approach. Salt water to heal your sinuses, coffee with soy milk and coconut, a blanket to warm your shoulders, bag of blue ice for your spine. So I'm just kind of reading along through here. Here's one called Why Women Live Longer. You can hear two thin minor chords through the wall and the song in a broken falsetto as you lie on the couch, half out of your body, unable to feel your feet. Dead leaves blowing off the tin roof just ahead of the rain. Then something about a coal mine, something about a train. You don't like her to see you like this, though she knows you well, your socks falling down and the rough hair all worn away from your shins, which are shiny now, like an old man's, which is what you're becoming this afternoon, listening to faint music, watching the shadows drift down the gray ceiling, stained like a liver X-ray. She comes in the house with her girlfriend. They soldier along through the desert of time. They rub lotion into their aging calves. Speaking of shoes, speaking of hair, the tea roses climb in the mailbox. If you could, you would visit your father's ashes, long since scattered on Lighthouse Beach. No matter the feeling of rootlessness, of night coming on and the early stars almost out of reach. I'll just read one more. I'll read one out of the news section. Those are all oldies but goodies, more or less, eh? And try to pick one over here that isn't too long, because we want to save some for you guys to ask us any questions which we will answer brilliantly, of course. So this is one, like, I got in this kick where I was reading a bunch of Wallace Stevens poems, and he's very hard for me to figure out. So what I did was I got his paperback collection and I kept it by the John. And I read Wallace Stevens for almost a year, I think, as you can imagine, quite frequently. And I'm not sure that I understand him very well, but I observed a few things about him. And one year, about 3 years back, 3 years back, we got to go teach in Austria, but they paid us enough that when we were done, we could take the plane down to Venice and stay for a couple days, and we did. And this is called Venetian Siesta. I know I'm getting away with a crime, stretched out on the couch and listening to rain, making a hole in the afternoon through which I can drift slowly away. For sleep is sometimes just as delicious as grilled polenta and creamy white fish. So I give up my hands, my tears and my face, the smells of tar, damp rope and mud, the late slanted light of November, rippling below on the gondola wood. And then I count backwards from 27, trying to pretend I'm Wallace Stevens, he of the freakish intellect and the taste of a ruthless, wandering gourmet who rummages in the mystical kitchen in search of oranges and cafe espresso, or a blown glass peacock, or a Byzantine horse cast in some delicate metal. He speaks of the world, how it's changed by art, and bread you can't eat, powdered with light, where someone is toasting their mother's health and someone is writing a letter to death, which makes things beautiful in its way, and also makes everyone the same, as laughter does, or the late autumn rain. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. That was awesome. If anyone has a question, feel free to type it in the chat. I can read it out loud, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself, whatever you prefer.
No questions.
We might have bludgeoned them into silence, man.
I don't think so. It was wonderful to hear those poems, Joe. My God, I feel like
yes, I felt the same way about you, dear.
It's been too long.
Yeah.
Michelle, let me say, Jessica, do you have any questions yet? I have a question for Joe, if you don't have any yet.
Yeah, we have one in the chat. Maxine,
okay, yeah.
I love how you weave the movie Arrival into that poem. Did that come naturally, or did you come to it later?
Was that for me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I could. And it was. I didn't hear my name. Could you repeat it?
Oh, of course. I love how you weave the movie Arrival into that poem. Did that come naturally, or did you come to it later?
That came naturally. It just occurred to me while I was writing the poem. That's my mind needs to be reined in sometimes, but occasionally I liked where it went in that poem, so I that's why I kept it in. It's a wonderful movie.
And that's a great digression too. That's a great digression. I love the way those poems of yours digress around. I do. It's great.
Yeah, well, as I said, I have to rein them in sometimes.
Yeah.
That one's in couplets, actually, which helps me a lot. I've come to see that actually lets me see the poem better, and perhaps shape the associations a little bit more so that they don't seem as blocky as they do sometimes. It's easy to access them.
Mm. Yeah, I find that too, actually. And also if I have a piece that I'm working on and I'm trying to see where it's what's up with it and how it's gonna go, I will break it into couplets. And a lot of times after I've done that, I find extra language in there that I didn't see before that I can take out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, you spread it out on the page like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe, if nobody else has got a question out there, there's one from Cecilia.
Yeah, question for Joe. Can you talk about the process of selecting your poems for the new book?
Sure. I had a very simple. I was utterly flabbergasted by trying to do it. I thought of doing it as a project for the pandemic. Right when the pandemic started, I said, well, I'm going to ask my publisher if he'll do this. And he said he would do it. So then I had my own version of them, which was completely hella long and ungainly, and it read very bumpily. And I just threw up my hands. I couldn't do it. And Dorianne said, "Why don't you let your friend and ex-student Mike McGriff help you with this? He knows your work really well, and he's got some editorial expertise. And why don't you just let him help you with it?" And then Costanzo, the editor, said, "And not only that, it can only be 130 pages." And I was like, I can't. But Mike was great. He said, "Yeah, we could do that. We'll make it." He wants to make it so people will still buy your regular books. And so he doesn't want you to put everything in it. And that's probably what he's thinking. Anyway, Mike did it. That was my, Cecilia, that was my process.
Give it to Mike.
Yeah, I gave it to Mike. Yeah. Max, what were you going to ask me?
Well, I was gonna ask you, because I haven't got to Selected yet, and I was looking at your poems today, and I was thinking about how often music occurs in the titles of your poems. It occurs in the poems as well. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what it is about music and song that, I mean, your poetry is incredibly melodic. I mean, that's what just really broke those poems they just break my heart to hear them because they're so beautiful. But I know you're drawn to this, and I wonder if you could talk about this a little bit.
Well, it's more and more and more. I got so like in my later books, I'm rhyming a lot. I have a lot more rhyme going on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I hit this period of time where some bad stuff happened to my son, and I was paralyzed kind of. I couldn't write anything. And when I started up to write again, I mean, it was like the only thing I could do was make these rhymes. And sometimes they were totally like Lewis Carroll nonsense rhymes. But I was like, I don't give a shit. I wrote something. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I have had that influence more and more coming on me. I think I had this musical thing going anyway before, but particularly in the last, I would say 4 years, I've just been rhyming more than I ever had before, and now I have to watch out, because I get carried away, so I have to cut it back, make them happen in the middle of the line, I don't do a bunch, stuff like that. So I don't. I'm grateful because I've told most of my stories, or I feel like I have, and then but then life happens, and then you get some more stories, but not as many as when you first start out, and you're writing all these identity poems, like this is where I'm from, and this is my dad, and this is my mom, and this is my dog, and this is my car. The early book will be an identity book, and anyway, or this is my love poems, but you keep going, and eventually the stories are, it gets more about the material, a little more about the material and the language itself. Although I've never been very good at being abstract, but that's my version of letting the language do its deal, is rhyme. And so I've been trying to do that. But thank you for asking.
Thank you for answering.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, someone's wondering, are you rhyming willy-nilly or in traditional forms?
Willy-nilly. no hesitation on that. I know, I used to read the great rhymed poetry like Yeats, especially Yeats. I admired so much, and I would read some of his work, and I would just think, I could never do that. Or contemporary rhyming formal poets who are so accomplished that just, and I could never do that. I still could never do that. I mean, even So. But the ones that I do mostly just occur to me, and now we go around. My wife and I go around the house making rhymes sometimes because it's so foolish, or making a little song out of something that isn't a song, and because poetry really is, it's close to song in a way, right? I mean, we're closer to song than the fiction writers or the playwrights or guys like that. I mean, and I think that's for sure. Yeah.
We're lyrical.
Yeah.
Well, it's quiet night out there in Question Land.
There's a lot of poets out there. I know there's a lot of poets out there, and they probably got their own thoughts about this kind of stuff. They could probably be agreeing with some of it, and then the other parts of it, they're like, nah, no way. But very nice to see everybody. Very nice to see all the Oregonians. Yeah.
Joe, you can say no, but someone was wondering if you could close us off with Meadow.
Oh, Meadow. I'll be glad to, if that's, I'll be glad to. That's a poem I wrote for my father. And it's in couplets. And it's one of the ones I was able to write when I couldn't write anything. My father was always been kind of a muse for me. He's a freaking alcoholic, and he terrified me a lot when I was young, but I got over it. Oh Lord, sorry to keep you waiting. Meadow. My father is a lowland meadow. His tall rushes bend in the wind. Over the vetch and sedge grass hay, and the pernicious dandelion with its tough single taproot that inches down through the clay. He opens his heart to the April rain and the horses he loved when he was here to lean up against and whisper and stroke inside their silken ears. At night, he sees Venus hanging close to the moon, and he doesn't care about ideas or sleep or how far he had to roam, drifting through space in the silent deep, caressing the dawn's irresistible face, following the way back home.
Thank you both so much. That was awesome. If there are any other questions in the audience, or you just want to say hi, feel free to unmute yourself, and then we'll close out. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for being here.
That was fabulous.
Thanks, everyone, for being here. It's a great reading.
Thank you, Susan.
Good to see you. Good to see you both.
So many faces that I know and love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll just say quickly, Maxine, I just bought your new book and I'm enjoying it immensely.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Appreciate it.
It is a great book.
It is, Joe.
Yeah.
I just want to say how lucky I feel to have studied with both of you, Maxine and Joe.
Oh, Suzanne.
Thank you so much for tonight. Wow. I will get both of your books. I can't wait.
Great
Well,
to see
thank
you.
you.
Yeah, I want Joe's too.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Great to see you.
Thank you.